Good viewer. Watch Xirtus. Watch Xirtus.
Dobrodošli u NEUROPU. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to NEUROPA, special edition from Montenegro with a impromptu setup. We hope everything will be all right enough. If there's any issues, guys, please let us know. But we're doing our best to give you some short life update from where we're at and what's going on.
I'm trying to load the overlay. You see my picture in the background. We made like a new pagoda kind of image. This is basically what it looks like here. There's just all sorts of Slavics, bears and pigs and wolves and sheep and rabbits. I think it's like a Soviet Disney time down here. It's pretty beautiful. I would highly recommend visiting if you ever have the chance, the Balkans, because they're still not part of the EU. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, so we've been to so many different places on our way here, together with Martin Hipp, whom some of you know from some Tartaria presentations and the heraldry presentation we did. We'll make sure to invite him back very soon and properly go over the trip. It was a lot. Within only one single week, we started in Bosnia. We went to the Bosnian pyramids in Visoko, which are super amazing and awesome for their negative ionization, about which I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more. We've been to, which was the next place? Mostar. We've been to Albania eventually, but in between we've been to Kosovo, North Macedonia, Skopje, and yeah, Pristina was interesting in Kosovo as well. And now finally we ended up here on the beautiful coast of Montenegro in Budva. Or strangely enough, the particular district we're in is literally called Raffaelovici, which is quite fun, I guess.
I do like it a lot. He's basically the mayor of the town. Although, you know, being the mayor doesn't mean as much in a mob town. I think that's kind of you just do what the mob tells you, just like everybody else. But you know, it's got your namesake, and there's all these cool little Serbo-Orthodox churches. Like, if you walk down the beach, there's like a hill, and you can walk up the hill, and you can see like all of these Orthodox icons everywhere, which are very beautiful. But they're building so much, which is really interesting. A few years ago, it wasn't so vast. I mean, Kotor had a lot, but Bar and Budva were, you know, mainly just port towns and Serbian tourist towns. And now they both, I mean, you can see here, there's just tons of skyscrapers right on the beach that they're filling up that people can rent or buy houses from, and Bar as well, just south of Budva. It's, we were hanging out with these Turks who were electricians, metalsmiths, blacksmiths, masons, tile workers, all of that, bricklayers. And they are, in the process, they build these concrete structures, and then they'll put up the bricks, and then they'll fill them up, and then they put these facades on them to make them look nice and modern. And very quickly they fill up with people. So it's interesting because this place used to be very scarcely populated, and there were Serbian tourists, but that was like kind of limited to like certain places. And that's still kind of true. Like you go from one town to another and you'll see that's where everybody's at, or at the center towns in front of the towers. But there's a lot more people than I expected, and there's a lot of tourists that are coming in. You can just see in a couple of years it'll be more. It's going to be like Monaco or like parts of North Italy just filled with tourists just stacked up on each other right next to each other, which is kind of crazy. Although it gets cold here, so I feel like the best time to be here is in the winter time. I don't know, a lot of people don't like cold beaches, but I kind of do. And I've seen pictures of snow on the beaches, but also nobody's there. Like the towers are completely empty. So we'd have to make a trip back just to see it in the winter time to see what it's like. Cause that seems like when tourist towns are a ghost town, that's pretty nice. Although also having recently been back in California and seeing Los Angeles and Venice Beach, which used to be the most populated and packed, like the places now remind me of Venice Beach like 10 years ago. But Venice Beach is a ghost town year-round now. Businesses can't afford to rent. And I just wonder how long saturation works, because you fill up a place because it's less crowded, and then it becomes crowded. So people will fill up another place. So humanity expands like a virus, like in the Matrix. That kind of seems true. It rings true here.
Yeah, really the easiest way to explain what's going on here to anyone who knows Europe, which probably not too many listeners here do actually, but it totally reminded me of Northern Italy, which got overdeveloped, I guess. And for some reason, people just keep going there. It seems people like to aggregate in these ways. We've been discussing with Andreas, whether it's the NPC mentality. People just love watching other people. Maybe for many of you, many of us, it's can almost be a bit too much. Like even just today, at 9 p.m., we went on the boardwalk and it was so crowded, you almost stumble over each other. Also the prices, you literally feel just like you're at home, probably like in the US or like in Europe. They actually use the euro here in Montenegro, and the prices are very similar, sometimes even more expensive than what I would pay for random groceries or to get a pizza in Vienna, which is pretty interesting. However, at the same time, it seems the Montenegrians, the Kosovarians, and the Serbians in particular that come here, they got money. So either they work all year in Germany or something like that, or they have some other business, questioning, of course, potentially something not perfectly legal, or simply whatever they got from Soviet bureaucracy, whatever they could pull out when Yugoslavia was falling apart. We've been talking about this with Andreas, and also we've been recording many different videos, which we hope to edit, most likely not during this trip, but sometime this year there'll be some updates and some really nice things. We've seen a lot, and we'll be recording more to give you guys some good quality information about whatever we perceive over here.
Yeah, I mean, so there's black market, obviously. I mean, anywhere that there's a coast, you're going to be able to bring in things that are, hidden in tomato cans or in vehicles or whatever. And that's a big part of it, obviously. Like there's definitely Albania and, Montenegro have cocaine smuggling that goes into Europe, but that's not the only thing, right? There's also weapons smuggling and everything else, but there's a lot of gray market. Illegal is, I mean, those are the big ones, obviously. And you can see why it's looking like Miami, because Miami had the same thing happen to it, where skyscrapers were built with bricks, literally and figuratively. But there's also a lot of gray market. And like the big thing in the Balkans was always tobacco. It was always cigarette and tobacco smuggling. Even before Europe had really solid tobacco taxes, there were embargoes on a lot of the tobaccories in the Caribbean and Cuba. Everyone loves Cuban cigars, right? Well, Yugoslavia didn't have an embargo with Cuba. So for decades, people would get their cigars through Yugoslavia, which was a major way to make money. But then also cigarettes became a big income source in the 90s because all of these countries have cigarette taxes, tobacco taxes. So if you could get cartons of cigarettes and you could bring them through into organized Europe, you were able to make tons of money. But cars as well, because there are emission standard laws in Germany and in Europe that make even German cars illegal in Germany. I mean, if you buy a Mercedes or a like there's when you go to Germany, you'll see less and less Volkswagen Golfs from 20 years ago. Not just because people don't want to drive them, but because they're not able to get the emission standards to accept them. But if you can register your car in the Balkans, then you can drive your car and you can usually get cars. I mean, this is a big thing, is bringing a Mercedes or bringing tons of Mercedes that have failed emission standards down to the Balkans, doing some work on them, and then reselling them here. And you'll see tons of those. Particularly, we notice this in Kosovo, but we see it here too. Lots of Serbians are driving in Mercedes, €100,000 cars, Mercedes and BMWs, and etc. And that's quite a status symbol here still, is having German goods.
Yeah, I think they really have super nice cars. It makes me feel very poor seeing all of those cars. Of course, they get some discount, just as you explained. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. It seems, especially the Serbians, they love coming here. They love spending all their money here. It even seems a status symbol to get a place on the beach. That's another thing we spoke about. Many of the beaches here are private. At one time, we were walking down the path, and I was like, well, I'm feeling so hot. I just briefly want to, catch this shower, which anyway is out in the open. And I'm just walking in 5 minutes. They're like, are you visiting the hotel, which costs like $200-300 a night? It's like, no. All right, I'm moving on. There is a few areas which are stone beaches where you have like a public area. But even just yesterday, we've been out there. There were not many people there. So it seems it's really important to most people that come here to have the status of having their own private umbrella and all of that. However, we were more or less surrounded, well, not assaulted, but surrounded by a group of Italians, about 100, many of them teenagers, some adults. They literally came out of nowhere, started putting up their umbrellas right next to us, and then even put on some music, started dancing. It was a pretty crazy scene. I wish I would have recorded it, but it happened within 2 minutes. It was pretty amazing.
Right, we're just sitting on the beach, very similar again to New Pagodi here. We were just sitting on the beach and there was no one. And then all of a sudden, literally within a foot of us, kids started putting umbrellas just all around, and not just behind us or on the side of us, but in front of us as well. We were completely surrounded and crowded off the beach. It felt like we were Kosovo. It was pretty funny, actually, in a lot of ways. I appreciated that.
Yeah, also, we walked to that spot a bit farther down, which is like a viewing spot or something with really deep, steep cliffs. And to me, if you only have the slightest bit of vertigo, not everything is perfectly protected. And I was only like, whoa, it seems almost dangerous to walk around here. I wouldn't go here with my children if I had any, or be really careful around that place. But very beautiful, of course. All kinds of different people here, but really just like you have Northern Italy basically made for the Germans and Austrians. When you go to certain places and hotels there, 80% of individuals are from Austria or Germany. The staff, of course, speak German. And here it seems very similar with Serbians in particular, also Kosovarians and Montenegrins, of course.
Bosnians are strongly into it.
It really seems like their own private, almost vacation spot, or because Montenegro is a pretty new country, almost seems as if it is their associated vacation states where everyone loves to go, because Montenegro is the country that actually has the coast.
Yeah, so that's another important thing, is Montenegro has only existed for like 19 years. I mean, not exactly true. There was an empire in Montenegro that existed, for like you could say this for most Slavic cultures, that there was a kingdom, I think it was called Zlati, that was here. But Montenegro was part of Yugoslavia for since Tito in the 20th century. And when Croatia, Slovenia, and Albania started to break off, and Yugoslavia was no longer Yugo, wasn't like the one Slavic state, Serbia and Montenegro stayed together into 2006. In 2003, there was starting to already be some changes in the way they looked at it, and to be more of a union of states than Serbo-Montenegro union. It was, two different countries that were allied together, that were aligned and had trade agreements and everything else. But because Bosnia was breaking them up in between, it became difficult, and they were starting to look at themselves as their own country more and more. But there's seriously strong ties between Serbia and Montenegro. And it was in 2006 that they finally became what is now a separate country. And we looked at the coat of arms, actually. Let me show the coat of arms of Montenegro. Hold on, I'll pull it up here. It looks very, it's on the flag as well, but it's this symbol right here. So it's the double-headed, let me make that easier to see, the double-headed eagle holding the scepter and sphere with a singular crown with the symbol of the Montenegrin lion in the shield there. And you might have seen a symbol very similar to this before. Let me look also at Albania coat of arms. The Albanian coat of arms is pretty similar, but it's black. But you'll also note let me show you, they wear a Phrygian cap instead of a crown, which is pretty interesting. Like the Smurf hat, this is the black crow, the double-headed black crow or black eagle, wearing the Phrygian cap and not holding a scepter and spear, because they, this is obviously Albania is not a kingdom the way it used to be. It's more of a Masonic Moorish state. But what you will notice, see, this is also interesting with the double crown, the double Phrygian cap. But the other one is the Russian coat of arms, because if you look at this symbol for the Montenegro coat of arms with a single crown and compare it to the Russian coat of arms, this is on the ruble. This is not on the flag, which is one of the reasons I hadn't thought of it. But this was something that Raffael had picked up on, was that it's very similar in a lot of ways to the Montenegro coat of arms, right? It's the golden eagle. It's holding the scepter and sphere. It has a crown, but there's a singular crown on both heads of Montenegro, which I think represents Serbia in that sense. But it's different because there's a triple crown for Russia. Russia's holding both crowns, and they're united together, the east and the west, sort of the Tartar style fez crown. And instead of the lion that you see on the shield for Montenegro, you see St. George slaying the black dragon, right? That's what's mainly different between the two. But if you look for the Montenegro flag looks very much like this. It's red, has the golden eagle. It's just slightly changed in that way.
Yeah, so one thing we spoke of also is what's interesting, of course, is the business structures here. So, of course, many things also which we shared is perfectly easy to find. Any lookup will tell you, what are the biggest businesses here. Of course, around here on the, let's say, white side, you have all this tourism going on. And what I found very interesting, although understandably many investors, let's say regular European or Western investors, would not be so prone to invest in these structures, but actually the legal and tax structure here is pretty interesting. I would love if the European Union would take a bite out of that, because you have a 9% flat tax and the LLC is only $1 to put in. Of course, there's a few upkeep costs. However, what's interesting at the same time, and what really confused me in the beginning, if you just look at the license plates, on the left-hand side in the European Union, you always have this European Union blue stripe. And then it says, for example, AT or whatever the country would be, which is in the European Union. However, Montenegro, the Kosovoan Republic, and Albania, they also have that blue stripe. They have their initials there, Serbia. However, they just don't have the stars on top of it. So, well, anyways, I would love if European Union would adopt a 9% flat tax like in Montenegro. I'm sure it would greatly assist business. However, it more seems as if Montenegro, for example, is actively trying to adapt the legal framework to be able to join the European Union, especially considering also that they didn't even care to issue their own currency. maybe this even started back when they gained independence. They simply said, we're just gonna adopt the euro, which of course in a way is great for European tourists. It's easier to compare prices and to know what's going on. You don't need to exchange money. However, still, if you would come here from the European Union, you would be wise to take your own cash or something, because it seems every transactions, every ATM you go to, they give you a surcharge. And even transactions at the supermarket, or I got a SIM card, which would have been $5, but then I get the receipt on my card, it's $6 something. So they love to put a surcharge on everything. However, on the other side, which you also can get here, which we both have, and which is why we're even able to do this stream, is to get a data plan, which is crazy, because you maybe pay about $20, you get it for 1 month, and they literally give you 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, which I wonder if you could even use, because the speeds are not so amazing, which is why we're each using our own hotspot now to make this possible. But it is quite crazy, just the amount of data they throw at you if you get an eSIM or an actual SIM card while you're on vacation here.
And in general, Russia is an interesting player, because Russia is not allowed. There's EU sanctions against Russia, similarly to the way that we enacted in the United States embargoes against Cuba. But Russia was for a long time, and today still, able to finance itself in the West by owning businesses in other countries. But while Serbia has not imposed and has denied the EU sanctions and are not imposing EU sanctions on Russia, Montenegro and Albania, I think both, have agreed to impose sanctions against Russia, and have in some circumstances even frozen assets of Russian business people, which is interesting because Montenegro has always been a place. I mean, Russia needs outlets in Western Europe in order to make their business deals. So Russia for a long time was buying up apartments, and Russians were buying up apartments and buildings in Montenegro. They still have a lot of this, but they're often financed and funneled through Serbia. So Serbia keeps control, and there's at least a proxy between the businesses. But it's more and more EU aligned here. Montenegro has clearly made its intentions that it wanted to join the EU and be a Western country like Croatia, although a Serbo-Orthodox Western country like Croatia. Serbia, on the other hand, has been more interested in working with Russia and always has been. And so there's still mafiosos, you could say, and businesses that are associated with organized. I mean, saying organized crime seems complicated because some things are not criminal and some things are licensed by different states. But certainly there are things that are unacceptable in Europe, in the European Union, that are being done in some way through organizations. For instance, in Budva, there's the Kovac organization, which are major porters. I don't want to say port smugglers, but porters really, for the tobacco, for narcotics, or for weapons, etc. And also this plays into the tourist industry, because the more tourism requires investment for these large businesses and buildings. Montenegro isn't just building beach resorts. One of the things we noticed when we went through Bosnia, through what is essentially Serbian Bosnia, and past the Interzone into Kosovo. Well, we'll get into that in a second. Along the way, at the edge of Montenegro's northeast corners, are huge chalets, Switzerland-style chalets, huge hotels, as impressive as any that we've seen in Europe and any beach, but also more impressive in a lot of ways because they're designed to weather the elements for snow, because they're major ski resorts that they have up there. And it was just, I mean, as impressive as the density of hotel resorts that you'll see along the coast, it was really, I think, almost surprising how big their ski community has become. There's so much money going into building what is, to me, very similar to a Swiss village, but it's bigger than a village. I'd say these are for maybe 100 miles throughout the mountains. We saw just tons of new towers coming up that were beautiful glass, very tall, taller than any of the buildings that you see on the beaches here because they still seem to keep them about 6 stories here. Whereas in the snow areas, they can be 12 towers tall. And there's tunnels that are through the mountains that we were driving for 20 minutes. They're just drilling right through the Montenegrin mountains, which are designed to be, truckloads of people able to travel in the wintertime, in the dead of the cold, less than 0 degrees, well ventilated. It's an incredible amount of development that's already happened there. And again, this is money that's coming in from not just Western Europe, but also Eastern Europe, like both Russia and European Union investment. There's definitely Germans that are doing this. There's definitely Swiss that are doing this, but it would be, impossible to pretend that there isn't Russian money that's also involved in trying to figure out a way to ventilate itself because it's otherwise trapped in Russia. Things have changed a lot, clearly, in the last 5 years, though. You can see that Russians are consolidating their financial capital in Russia more and more and trying to build up Russia to be more autonomous and less reliant on international trade or on trade with BRICS economies. But Europe has relied on Russia for oil, and it still does in a lot of ways. Even when Germany says they won't buy oil from Russia, they're buying oil from India or China or what's the one that's in Hungary? The little country there? The little tiny fake country, right? That exists in
Liberland.
No, there's another one. Hold on. Tiny country in Hungary. Someone remember this for me? You guys get an extra point. Tree, like tree. There's another. Trikanitsa. I'll try to remember it. I'll come back to it. I'll look it up.
Anyhow, yeah, like you said, it was pretty amazing driving through Montenegro. Now we're at the beach, and here, of course, everything would be cheapest.
Transnistria. Sorry.
Oh yeah,
Transnistria. You guys familiar with Transnistria? It's a small little country landlocked in the center of Hungary, connected to Romania. And here on this map, you can see it's this little sliver right here, location of Transnistria. And the region's origins can be traced to the Moldavian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, right? And this is just on the east of, in Moldova, not too far from Ukraine. Transnistria is still a major issue for the European Union. They kind of are just considering them part of Russia when that's certainly not accurate. It's like Luxembourgians are there. Everyone's there, but it's a place for oil money.
Yeah, so in terms of actual people and tourists here, I think I did not hear a single tourist group speaking Russian here on the coast of Budva and Kotor. Of course, most speak Serbian. There were a few Germans that come here, not too many, although we heard from our last host that there were about 12,000 Germans last year that wanted to either buy property here or start a business or something along those lines. I've heard a few Hungarians, but it really seems that this is mostly the Balkan vacation spot. I would love to know how it is in the skiing regions. Maybe there is a different audience there. But yeah, it's pretty interesting and pretty fascinating. However, also during our trip, Martin Hipp said correctly, it's incredible how similar so many of these beach towns are in terms of how they're set up. You have the cafes at the beach. You have, in this case, many private beaches. You have overpriced towels and groceries and pizzas and all of that. But what I also want to say is the food here, while the prices may vary, you can actually get real tomatoes, real carrots. They actually have a taste. So you don't even need so much condiments, even though I was very happy that in the grocery store we actually found real salt, for example, Himalayan salt, things like that. But other than that, for natural products, organic products, either they just don't have them, even at the so-called pharmacy. And in the regular stores, as I guess it is similar to most normal supermarkets, you only have very questionable products in terms of all the additives and all the chemicals and so on inside. It's not that easy as it would be, for example, in Vienna or maybe in California to find a real organic store. Or we've been to different supermarkets just trying to find argan oil, for example, or any oil that's non-diluted, essential oils, it doesn't seem that people here are very much into that conscious organic wave yet. However, at the same time, like I said, quite some of the produce they have seems to be locally sourced, and the carrots actually have a great taste, and the tomatoes too. So that's a plus for sure.
I mean, another interesting thing to talk about is from our trip into Bosnia, because Bosnia was a lot cheaper. And I mean, granted, it's landlocked, but it's more affordable as you go east, especially towards Serbia. I mean, we went to a restaurant right in front of a military academy and base, yeah, essentially. And of course, the restaurant's right outside, right in front of the base. So you walk right out of the gate, and a sergeant or a captain could go meet a woman or some friends probably at this base. And they had some of the best squid that I've had on this trip. I mean, completely fresh. Obviously, things are being brought from the coast right to this restaurant. I imagine probably other things than just squid are being brought, but they're getting fresh updates all the time. And the prices were, like 3 to 4 euros for the plate, 6 euros maybe. Completely different than the Monaco prices you'll find in some of the tourist towns, where getting a piece of frozen fish is probably like 20 euros in some of these places, which is crazy, but not everywhere. But it's just the point of being Eastern Bosnia is insanely cheap still, compared to any place where they know that there's foot traffic coming from tourists, especially for their own military. I think it was interesting to see the prices for that. And as we went through Montenegro, there were fires going, but we went through these small towns where we started noticing the houses were auspiciously large and brick and very fancy. The roads were nicer, and they're completely isolated away from everyone else, even so far as having new highways that use toll roads. So if you weren't going there, you're not paying the toll and you're not getting on these roads. And you're certainly not paying to get off of those roads in these small towns. So they're very clearly oligarchical homes, either from bureaucrats that were able to get money out of Yugoslavia as it collapsed, or are currently getting money from whatever illicit activities. We saw Tesla taxis in the middle of parts of Montenegro, actually, which were pretty interesting. Just clearly lots of money in certain places. But once we left Montenegro, there was a point, usually when you go from a border, because in European Union, there's no borders anymore, and you don't even notice borders. But once you go into the Balkans and you leave the EU, you start to go through these borders. And they're the same as borders like Checkpoint Charlie used to be in the DDR. You go out of the country, they look at your passport to make sure that it's okay for you to leave the country, which I'm sure some people have problems with. But that's usually the easy part. Then as soon as you go past one guard, you go to the next guard, and the next guard's got its own building right in, like there's no space between these buildings essentially. And this next building will be the new country's guard, and they're checking your passport to see if you're able to enter this new country. And it takes a lot of time. It can take hours, and you'll just see people standing there waiting to get from one car to the next car through a lot of the time. We didn't have that problem when we left Montenegro. And it was all different. Essentially, we leave Montenegro and they stamp our passport, and we're all of a sudden driving. We're not in the next country yet. We're literally in what is called the Interzone. We're in a place, and this is not for 30 feet or 60 feet. This is literally miles that we're in this huge forest where we saw what looked like more like Bosnian pyramids. I'm pretty sure that the Interzone has some ancient pyramids there that are covered in mountains, as well as some CIA guys, because, if you could, you would probably, wouldn't you want to live in the Interzone if you could? You could see little houses like off these obscure roads going off into the mountains, but really a lot of the things were shielded. You couldn't see almost any houses. There were Romani, I think there were definitely like gypsy encampments that were in this Interzone, but generally there's nothing there except for all sorts of nature for a half hour or something like that, until we eventually get to this new border, which is the new border of Kosovo. And Kosovo, I mean, this is all UN protected lands in the Interzone. So it's an international Tibet-like experience to be in this like proto-Slavic ancient forest mountain zone that is not part of any country, right? One of the most interesting places I think I've visited in the world. I would really say that there's nothing like it. I mean, I guess the Golden Triangle in Laos and Cambodia and China, those are kind of similar experiences, but there's something really interesting about this being in Europe and being in the Balkans. And so once you get into Kosovo, it looks like Iraq. Because I mean, and I don't mean like the desert. I mean like post-America invasion, where we've built all these gas stations and there's all of these government-associated corporations that have taken over. Melissa says, "Show us on the map." Okay, I can do that. Let me pull up a map for you to show you the Interzone. Hold on. Okay, so Bosnia Herzegovina. Here, that's a good point. A map is pretty useful. So this is the cat playing with Australia. I don't know if you've seen that cat playing with Australia. This is the way to draw the world is a cat playing with Australia. Have you seen this? This is it's
That's
beyond
hilarious.
No, I mean like we're living in a simulation. I don't know what else to tell you. But yeah, so in the necklace, no, like in the heart of the world is the Balkans. So let's zoom in on the cat. We'll go here. You see Italy's the boot. From the boot, there's Croatia, right? And this is why Austria, like Slovenia above Croatia, they didn't consider themselves as Serbian. In fact, during the Pan-Slavic movement, Slovenia considered themselves Austro-Slavic because they consider themselves part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And while Slovenians speak a language very similar to Serbo-Croatian, as you might call it, there are key differences. One of the main differences in Slovenia is they count numbers like Germans count numbers. Instead of saying 22, you would say 2 and 20, right? Things like that. But you can see Croatia gets a lot of the coastline here, right? This is all Zagreb. This is all Croatia until you get to Montenegro. And so Serbia connects directly with Montenegro. So it's easy to go from Serbia through Serbia right into Montenegro, where you get all of these coasts. Albania similarly, although Albania has a lot of sway over North Macedonia. North Macedonia is also a Serbo-Orthodox state that really considers themselves Hellenists. They look at themselves as the descendants of Alexander the Great. But you'll see this is Kosovo, okay? And when I zoom in on Kosovo, you'll notice a couple things. One is that all these other border lines are straight lines, which means they're solid borders. But the border on the Serbian side of Kosovo is not a solid border. It's all this dotted line, like fill in the dots, kind of thing. And the reason is because Serbia doesn't recognize Kosovo and certainly doesn't recognize the border as being the final border. But they're not much able to do anything about it ever since Bill Clinton, who you can see here, there's this North Korean style statue of in Pristina.
Pretty small though, I'd say. Pretty unimpressive, honestly.
I would agree. Bill Clinton, yeah, I would agree. He's a small, weak man. No, I'm just kidding. But happy birthday, Bill. I know your birthday was the 20th, right? So that was a couple days ago. So happy birthday, Bill Clinton. But yeah, they really like them there. The Bill Clinton Boulevard, and they also have a George Bush Boulevard, I think. Let me say, like, is it Bush, Kosovo, George Bush Street? It's spelled, yeah, George Bush. Do you see this? This is how I would spell George if I were to name someone George. It would definitely be George. It's just that's the best thing I've ever seen, honestly. Melissa says Kosovo is like a major landmark, old city, historically significant place they love to grip onto. Yeah, totally true. It's too bad it was like majorly bombed to all hell. Because again, as you get into Kosovo, you'll see it does kind of have this desert vibe until you get to Pristina. Pristina is the main capital of Kosovo. But the desert vibe is filled with just crazy like knockoff looking strip malls, gas stations, people selling, gray market luxury vehicles. It's an interesting place in a lot of ways, but as I first got into Kosovo, I was like, I am not going to like this place. Like, I mean, we had a bad interaction with someone on the road at one point who literally when we went to a store with Martin, came to like get in a fight with Martin. And I was like, oh God, am I going to have to like diffuse a Slavic duel immediately with a German Teutonic knight? This doesn't seem like my kind of evening. But I think they were Albanians. I don't know if that means anything to you. So we got to Kosovo and into Pristina, noticed all of these these skyscrapers. It's one of the densest cities I've seen. And I mean, the population seems really impressive, but the average age of the citizens are so young. I think it's like 22, 24 is the average age of the citizens. We saw a lot of people there walking in the streets, which were kind of like young and beautiful people. Let me see if I can find a kind of is this DRM thing that's keeping me from showing it to you. Is that what's going on here? I have my own videos being blocked, so I can't show you the footage. Is this working? Weird. It seems to like not let me show you the footage I have. I might have to download it in some way to show you. Here, is this a photo? This should work, right? Okay. So here's my backside. Here's a bunch of people walking through Kosovo's capital, Pristina. And you'll note, I mean, there are lots of young people, young men and women that are all like 16, 18, 21. And they're all, they're beautiful Slavic people. Like everywhere you go, you'll see like lots of beautiful people that are happy. And I mean, some of them were, we did some interviews, which we'll eventually probably be able to share some of the conversations that we did walking through. But a lot of people were talking about the disparaging difference in finances of the elite, because there are, I think, $2 an hour. I mean, it's very similar to Bill Clinton's America. The minimum wage was super low and there were super elite people with lots of money. But $2 an hour is pretty common. Yeah, demographic warfare, Freudian slip. Yeah, demographic warfare. But that's kind of cool in a lot of ways. Like the fact that they're all so young and vibrant, you're going to see a huge boom in the Kosovo population, I would imagine. A lot of these kids are probably going to have more and more families. Mephistopheles, I'm so jealous. You know what? I would love to travel with you. At some point, Mephistopheles, I can almost guarantee it, that we're going to do some sort of a crazed adventure and exploration. Well, I wanted to say, though, in Kosovo, particularly in Pristina, we noticed, we thought we saw a lot of elite vehicles here, more in Kosovo. Just the amount of BMWs, Mercedes, $100,000, $120,000 cars everywhere. It was crazy. And you can see the infrastructure being built up, similar to, again, Iraq, from the American military. There's a reason why Bill Clinton's statue and Bill Clinton Boulevard is a major part of Pristina, because they look at themselves as kind of saved by Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton came in and did all sorts of, on actually the day of the Columbine shooting, the Clinton administration dropped more bombs on Kosovo than the rest of the war combined. So, out of sight, out of mind, kind of a distraction, but they were able to really like level the place. And so most of Kosovo is new, not all of it. We do have some images of what old Kosovo, and when I say old Kosovo, there is like historic Kosovo, but I just mean Yugoslavian Kosovo, which isn't Soviet, but it's certainly not Western European either. It's very much a socialist federation, and you can see the brutalist architecture, or the Soviet influenced brutalist architecture. Although that's another thing that we should talk about at some point, is the difference, because Russia during the Stalinist period was a bit neoclassical. It wasn't as brutalist. Brutalism is a far more German architectural style. Looking at Bauhaus and these square blocks and these post-bourgeoisie designs, that's a Frankfurt School idea. It's not a Soviet idea. The Soviets did, for a period in like 1920s, have an anti-bourgeoisie aesthetic, But by the time of Stalin, they moved back into kind of architectural niceties. And it wasn't until maybe the 70s and 80s during Khrushchev and Brezhnev that they started emulating Western Europe, even maybe more so than Western Europe, by building these grids of brutalist cubic buildings like you see in the background here. Actually, this is a good example. You could say that Stalinist style buildings look like these new sort of pseudo neoclassical buildings above my head on the right. And Khrushchevian brutalism is more this sort of socialist square stuff that you see on the left, which is kind of what you see in America, to be honest. I mean, there's, I think, generally a war against aesthetic that's being waged by capitalists, not necessarily by socialists who want to accumulate finer public spaces. But yeah, a big part of the economy that we should probably mention is organ trafficking, human trafficking. It's not just drugs, it's not just cigarettes, it's not just cars. Kosovo is well known for organ trafficking and for bringing Syrian refugees in, actually through Kosovo as well. So, I mean, the amount of money to be made by getting someone into Western Europe, by going through smuggling through borders, particularly for wealthier individuals, that's the way to go. Oh, Scott's talking about the Brutalist movie on HBO. Adrian Brody Escapes Hungary. Yeah, I think this movie is really important and people should see it. I was really looking into it a lot recently, into Catholic brutalism. And of course, the movie The Brutalist is kind of about this. It's about the architect who starts building concentration camp inspired architecture for Catholic churches, which there's definitely kind of a poetic justice to. People are forced to make money to support their giant families. Well, I mean, that's probably true anywhere where people have large families. But I also worry about the collapsing economies causing people to have less kids. So it's true in both ways. There's definitely people that are having large families, but there's also people that are having, clearly these kids are having less families than they used to. And they're strutting their stuff, hoping that they can get together. But something about this sort of Instagram, TikTok generation, once you design a toxic culture, it memes really hard. And it's one thing you can say, oh, this is Western Europe is doing this, but when these kids see it, they emulate it. And girls, particularly here, emulate Western values. So Western values can be they can be very distinct and strongly influential in Eastern Europe because they're looking at it a lot closer than they could have 20 or 40 years ago. 40 years ago, you might have just had your ideas about the West and thought, oh, well, the West is, I want to be like the West. Well, what's the West like? Well, the West is free. Well, the West isn't free, but their idea of a free West is better. So this is something you might have noticed if you've ever looked at Kazantip, the Ukrainian Kiev Black Sea festival. It's like the Burning Man could never be, because their interest, let me show you. Yeah. Meaning Kardashian values. Absolutely. That's Kardashian mind control is a big issue. Let me just show you Kazantip really quickly. This was a thing that was a fascinating phenomenon in the Ukraine for a long time. They had an idea that was sort of Balkan checkpoint values, essentially like Burning Man, except it lasted not for a week, but 6 months or something like that. Summer comes and you could take all of the socialist infrastructure trains in, and they had their own border, their own checkpoints, like their own visa to get in. The ticket was a visa. And you got into this little micronation of Kazantip with your yellow polka dot suitcase, and then you would get to be free, right? Free from Soviet values, kind of the 1999 Russian freedom that everyone aspires to have. This idealized abstract Slavic freedom. I mean, it still has sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or rather techno, but it was so much more open in so many ways because they were naive to the failings of the West, particularly of exploitative capitalism, of military industrial complex, of mass manufacturing, of planned obsolescence, of social media, of MK Ultra mind control. So it's interesting to see just the kind of things that were going on at Gaziantep, but it was essentially shut down eventually by the Putinian government in Medvedev as well in 2014, I believe, when they first took that part of Ukraine.
Yeah, in Pristina, we spoke to some young guys where we had some pizza, and they said, yeah, they earn about $2 an hour. They work about 12 hours a day. And then we were like asking just as a joke, how are the women here, this and that, or what's important to them? And they said, maybe unfortunately inspired from the West, well, if you don't have money, you're not getting anywhere. And then, of course, any of them who could, even maybe the guy we spoke to was maybe 21 or something, but he had already been to Innsbruck for a few months, which is a small town in Austria. And of course, immediately I asked, well, which place do you like better? You prefer Pristina or Austria? He said he preferred Austria. He's also been in Switzerland working as a construction worker. I guess there they earn comparatively a lot more money, even though most likely for European standards, it's still a very low wage, I would imagine, as a construction worker compared to what you would have to pay to an Austrian. So as every so often, but even here, it's the same thing everywhere. I'm feeling like, what's his name? The Soviet spy, the KGB agent who spoke about communism. Anyways, it's the same thing everywhere. In this case, that even here in Montenegro, you have Mexican guest workers, you have guest workers from, or there's a few Indian people running around. I'm not sure what they're doing here exactly, to be honest. But anyways, always having guest workers from somewhere else, which may be an even poorer country, and you put them in a place like here, which is a big tourist town. You charge the tourists a lot of money, and this way the businesses can somehow function. And I wonder who's really pulling out the profits. But it always seems to be this triangle arrangement, and any country that's starting to develop is still looking for guest workers that are even cheaper. However, they're happy to come there, of course, because they would earn a lot more money than they ever possibly could at home. So it's a very strange system with this type of globalized economy that we have. And I can only hope that the countries now that want to join the European Union or become more westernized bring some more of their own influence. And if it is only just maybe to decrease regulation in the EU, which is heavily overregulated, and I can only hope there will be some type of positive fusion occurring in terms of culture, legal frameworks, and all of these things, because obviously simply copying whatever we're doing in the European Union does not really seem to be the best way to go forward, because the European Union, of course, also has a lot of problems. Even just these days, I've been checking the recent talk from Austrian politics and economy. The grocery prices are insane, just like in the US. It doesn't seem that that's really sustainable. I'm wondering what's really going on here in the back end, if it's just a global siphoning off of money from the middle class or whatever is going on. But yeah, many things that seem not exactly ideal. However, at the very least here in Montenegro, as Andreas mentioned, you still have lots of development. You have, we met Turkish guest workers in this case, and just because we spoke about food and the police or military, one of the most interesting individuals we met literally was a police colonel from Azerbaijan, of all places. And just because we had limited food and this was like a shared kitchen, I made some eggs because we bought like 12 eggs and knew that by tomorrow we better use them up because we're moving to a different place. The guy was completely amazed by my scrambled eggs for whatever reason. And then he said, yeah, he's eating 10 eggs and drinking 2 vodkas. And later we went outside, they had a beer, smoke a cigarette, and the Azerbaijani guy, again, police colonel, started singing in the most amazing way, and he didn't stop. And it was just crazy. And I thought like, wow, so this is what it takes to be a police colonel in Azerbaijan. This is the character and attitude you have. Very sympathetic, very nice, very cool, but absolutely not what you would be expecting.
I wanted to pull up the maps because Melissa brought up showing maps. I thought that'd be good to kind of show the differences between the old kingdoms, right? Because you have the Kingdom of Bosnia, which included Croatia, and then you have the Principality of Zeta, which is what Montenegro really today is kind of built around the ancient Kingdom of Zeta, of the Bishici, I think, family. And Budva is here. This is actually where we are, is Budva, and you can see Kotor is this region right here, which was part of Bosnia. So at this point, they consider it part of Montenegro because it's so much more Orthodox than Catholic. And that changed really centuries later from the Principality of Zeta. But you have the Dardanians, right, which were the kingdom of the Dardanians. This is the Dardani, which were in an Illyrian group, and this is what Kosovo traces their origins to, right? The Dardani tribe, a Paleo-Balkan Illyrian people. And I was trying to find, this is actually pictures, by the way, we have of Kosovo. So you can see how developed Kosovo is. We were walking by this building right here. This is the library. I think I have somewhere here. Where's that? This is the top of the National Library of Kosovo, which is, I think, very interesting. It has this sort of cubic, Kufic sort of quality to it with these domes, these kind of geodesic and is, I would say, almost Tartar, but more geodesic domes over every single roof, letting in kind of a shallow light onto all of the buildings. But let me see if I can show you. This is also, for whatever reason, this is considered to be the most important mural or monument of Kosovo. I don't completely understand why, but they're very proud of this freaking IKEA sign that they have there. This is what I wanted to show you, which is we looked earlier at the coat of arms of Montenegro and Russia and Albania. This is the coat of arms of Kosovo, right? And it's an interesting symbol because it's based on this ancient Illyrian statue of the goddess, which to me is so alien or reptilian, right?
This totally reminds me of what they found close to Klosterneuburg. We have to check this out and compare the pictures, because in Klosterneuburg, which is close to Vienna, this underground access site, they actually found statuettes which kind of look like this, and they found this hip bone, which at least the University of Kazan, of all places, confirmed that it is not human, but it's some humanoid cryptoid hybrid. And they had quite a few one statue at the very least, or two or three, and they look like halfway reptilian. And it somehow reminds me of this also, that below it like gets thicker or whatever, even though you can't properly see the legs here. We would totally have to compare that. I'm really wondering what this actually refers to. That's very interesting. And also, of course, how ancient that idea really is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could pull up the statue from Neuburg while I show. This is the goddess on the throne, which is a terracotta figurine found at the site of Toria spinning mill in Pristina, in the center of the capital of Pristina in Kosovo. And it's a female deity reflecting the cult of the Great Mother idol. It was preserved in the Kosovo Museum, which has adopted it as the idol, as their logo, right? So it's interesting, especially that after the Bill Clinton period, this sort of weird reptilian, alien-looking thing is kind of from the Dardanians, albeit, has landed as more important than a double-headed eagle or some Scottish Rite symbol, or the crucifix, or because also obviously Kosovo is not singularly Orthodox or Catholic or Muslim. It's a city that has all three, but really from a culture that predates Christianity in the region. So it doesn't say nearly as much as you'd like to. The statue was discovered by experts from the National Museum of Serbia in 1956. And the goddess on the throne was borrowed in late 1998 by the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Art Gallery for their exhibited title, Arheološko blago de Kosova, the archaeological treasures of Kosovo and the Meteora from the Neolithic period to the Middle Ages. So following the Kosovo War, while the figure was kept in Belgrade, eventually in 2002, the Coordination Center for Kosovo and Metahia Nebiosa Chovic returned the figurine to Pristina as a sign of goodwill towards Kosovo and Albanians, which I don't think the Serbians get enough credit for doing this post Milosevic. It's probably worth mentioning that there is a certain kind of respect that is seen from Serbia, and Serbia has done due diligence to have respect and camaraderie with nations that, you know, a decade or 2 decades earlier were, I mean, we talk about war crimes from the ICC all the time, but really Slavs letting sleeping dogs lie, or sleeping gods lie, as we've mentioned on this trip, seems like a pretty important thing to present as an accolade. Still, I mean, this statue is very strange and very Illyrian and very alien.
All right, so it's pretty difficult to find anything. I sent something in private chat. That's the one article that's somewhat publicly available. The image is really low quality. We'll have to look up if we find more about this. This is about close to Neuburg. At the very bottom, there's this one statue. If you go on, a few more pictures. I think that's an image of the statue. It's not even the full image. So really, it's difficult to find anything public. And also here, of course, again, just this year, the government came along and they want to bury the place, which makes you wonder, why don't you want to have anyone look into this and not make it a museum, but make it so difficult for the private excavator to do anything there? However, I would not be surprised if that is somehow a similar pattern or something, or a similar depiction. Yeah, and still I would love to know, because we recently had David Icke on, as you guys may know, talking about reptilioids. And then why do you have the University of Kazan even confirming that the hip bone they found, or upper leg bone rather, they found, is distinctively not human, but merely humanoid, and the statues they found there seem to match this bone which was there. So this is a big mystery, at least to me.
Absolutely interesting. Here's a couple more pictures we can show, Christina. Here's some like aerial pictures of, you know, these ruins, and here's what the city used to look like in 1924. You can see it was already a very dense place. And it's interesting how cities work. You know, as someone who doesn't live in a city, I know Raf is from Vienna, which is considered, I guess, the biggest village in the world, but it's still a city. The density of pre-internet places, you would go to the city or you would avoid it at all costs. Some people just want to live in a city, and to me that stresses me out. But I've noticed that's something that happens all the time. Here they're building these beach towns into cities. They're from Belgrade, they're used to it. I mean, it's stress. I don't know. It makes me anxious. It's like to be surrounded by so many people all the time. It's just, how do you escape this? It used to be the nice thing about the coast is you only had assholes on 3 sides of you, you know? But yeah, beautiful. I mean, there are beautiful cities, like, to be fair.
Is there anything else we want to show today? We took so many pictures and videos, you guys can't believe it, and hopefully we'll be able to edit it together in some way, shape, or form. All these different countries we visited. Now, as Andreas said, we're in Budva. Actually, we already visited the Budva Star Fort, which was very interesting. Not only the Star Fort itself, pretty cramped street, which remind you of some kind of a zombie game where you could be attacked on all sides or barricaded up. But also we actually found an inscription at what is there called the Citadel, which interestingly enough was in German. So there you can see, even in official history, this remnant connection to supposed Austrian Empire, or individuals there speaking Austrian or German rather, or speaking different languages. Very interesting to see. And there's actually quite a few star forts along the coast. There's one more further up, which ideally we'll also get to visit. Also one that's like an island. So we also have star forts around this area.
Star forts everywhere you go. Kotor is definitely a star fort. Actually, when we were walking through the old town star fort here in Budva, I was like, this is where we go. And then here will probably be, let's zoom in on you because it's just too good. Have you seen Raf's t-shirt? It says Star Fort. How great is this, right? But when we walked through the old town, I was like, we'll take a right here, we'll take a left here, we'll take a right here, we'll get to the ocean. And then I looked outside. I was like, well, that makes sense, I guess, because Star Forts are similar. But then there was a wall there. Yeah, right. Look at that. Don't you want that shirt? Don't you guys need that shirt? Buy this shirt. Buy this shirt from us. Star Wars is Knights of the Old Republic. Yeah, absolutely. KOTOR is Knights. This is another, speaking of that t-shirt, you know, because Star Wars, you'll start to notice that Star Wars is a loose allegory for balkanization, for the Crusades, for 19th century Rudyard Kipling, the man who would be king, all of these stories. Star Wars really takes these stories we can't talk about anymore and makes them more clear by making them about something that's not relatable, so that people, like, it's about aliens because people are super racist and used to think each other were essentially other kinds of species that were different than human, right? That's a major thing about Star Wars, at least in the old way. These days, Star Wars, I don't know what it's about, to be honest, but it used to be pretty clear. I mean, even the prequels, Episode 1, talking about the Trilateral Commission and the economic free zones. You have the accents of places in Cambodia and fourth world estates that were manufacturing, that were separated by the oligarchies of the Federation and the Republic, right? Which eventually kind of trapped themselves in some sort of New World Order empire, European Union style. You guys want that shirt? You're going to have to order that shirt. Go to n.artofpap.com and you can get yourself a Star Fort shirt just like Raph was wearing. But I was saying, we take a right, go out, and it's exactly where I expect it to be in this fort. And but I'm assuming you've never been there before. And I take a right and I go out and I look at it and I'm like, wait, is this where I've been? Because there's literally a building that looks exactly like the same side of the fort that I was at before, where there's windows at it, which are clearly some sort of hotel. And I think to myself, didn't I stay in that room? And it took me a while to realize, no, I haven't been in this particular fort, in that particular room. It took me a long time to recognize that, though, because I had been in the KOTOR fort in an exactly identical looking wall, in an identical looking room, because these forts were built probably with the exact same designs. So you'll notice that with Star Forts, that a lot of them, especially in this area along the Adriatic coast from Dubrovnik into KOTOR. Yeah, and if you wish to give a tip for our trip, that's a very good, that rhymes. I think that, I mean, just for that, you should probably tip. Go to Andreas.me or act like you know XYZ and send us a little money. That'd be sweet of you. But yeah, the Star Forts do look alike to each other. Another thing we could talk about is North Macedonia, maybe like Skopje. That's something we could show a little bit here. So when you get into Skopje in North Macedonia, which one of the things you'll see is this popping up here. Yeah. Here's an example of a very old socialist looking building, old socialist looking truck. They consider themselves Greece without the Turks, I think, is a way to look at it. Here's a Star Fort up on the hill in Skopje. And they think of themselves as the actual Greeks, right? Which very much offends the Greeks. Even George the Giant Slayer from Based AF, who just couldn't even psychologically process the saying this, but they think of themselves as Macedonia, where Alexander the Great comes from, right? So they've done a lot to disassociate themselves from the socialist architecture, and you can see it still, because this isn't a new building. This is an old building that has a new facade, but they put billions of dollars into making their capital into a neoclassical, Greco-classical, definitive icon, treasure, a city jewel for the world to visit. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's very poor, it's very cheap, and it's very sparsely populated. There's incredibly great prices, and I would highly recommend everyone go there.
At least at the hotel we've been, we went to like literally 5-star hotel, and it was potentially the worst service we ever got. And even the service woman, she didn't smile at us. It didn't seem that she spoke more than 2 words of English, if that. Was very surreal experience, especially surrounded by all these huge statues, which Andreas can talk more about, which is pretty amazing what they did there. But yeah, apparently their tourism industry is not as flourishing as over here on the coast of Kotor and Budva. There were some tourists, but it was definitely surreal having all these statues everywhere. And yeah, the 5-star hotel with non-English speaking waiter, things like that. Oh yeah, Alexander the Great, everything's just right there.
I'm trying to pull up a few of the pictures. These are the ones I like the most. Obviously, you've got these. There are more statues in Skopje than I think in almost any city in the world. I forget if that's true, but it's insane the amount of statues that they have. They're just everywhere. The amount of, I mean, they're really cool, really nice, really beautiful busts on these busts, you know. But Alexander the Great in the center, surrounded by lions with fountains. Some of them, we have videos of them actually, the fountains working. They're not working all the time. They're working some of the time. I don't know if that's just for saving energy costs there, but there's just, you know, statues of Macedonians and of important leaders of Macedonia, from Alexander the Great all the way through Gregor and Povich, right? But this is one of my favorite statues I saw, which is a pregnant woman. And then you have, I need to get to, let's see if I can find more examples. Here's on the 4 corners, women holding the different cycles of life. So from birthing to breastfeeding to holding your child, and then above to some sort of a warrior that emerges essentially. So they're really saying a lot with this statue system here, that, you know, it's all about the mother. The mother is, I hate that this videos won't emerge for you. Are you able to see this? Okay, that's good. You can see the pregnant on one side. You can see her holding a child on the other side. Is this one? There you go. And you can see the breastfeeding. And then above this, which I'm not able to show you, but you can imagine it, is a soldier, kind of a self-sacrificing hero. So it's saying that the heroes are created by the mothers, and the mothers of North Macedonia are the most essential part, right? Virgo and the lion. Yeah, this is, I think, also the Vestal Virgin's cult in a lot of ways. But it's more than that. It's actually like a political ideology to say that mothers are the most essential job in the state, and that the mother produces the child and the child becomes the hero, and that we need selfless, super truth inspired. They have an abstraction about God, or even beyond that, maybe a good, you know, a good association here is the World's Fair, the sort of ideology of this neoclassical World's Fair new religion. They're saying that they're the true Greece, they have the true Hellenism. This is not different than what America did when it first started itself. He's fighting for the family unit, classic Balkan stance. Yeah, for sure. For sure. This is, I mean, not even a joke. Like, the entire place is obsessed with the idea of the Balkan family unit and the value of command and conquer as opposed to divide and conquer. The essential mothers of Macedonia. Yeah, I mean, that's I think actually one of my favorite things I saw in a lot of ways, is that they really emphasize the importance of family and the structure of family. Once you leave Skopje, the capital city, the crown city of North Macedonia, it doesn't get ugly, which is also nice. Parts of Kosovo along the border were kind of terrifying with the Kastrati gas stations. That's something that was probably showing too. Hold on, I'll find it.
Yeah, so definitely the propaganda we saw about the mothers is something that you would not see in any westernized country, I'd imagine, at least not at these days. That was pretty cool to see, actually a state that put some value on that process. Of course, even me as an Austrian talking about that, I can't even keep talking about it, you know, without getting into strange waters. But as you guys may realize, mothers are very often much underappreciated. Much love to every mother and father who's actually taking care of their child. And here we have it, yeah. The Castrati gas station. And the best joke here is there is quite a few of those, I think especially in Kosovo it was. But also there is a few where behind it, funnily enough, here you can see it somewhat, yeah. You have something called Family Mart. So that's kind of a strange combination, the Castrati gas station and the Family Mart supermarket built into the Castrati gas station, whatever that's supposed to mean. I wonder if some Freemason thought that up as an inside joke. I don't know.
It's hard not to wonder. So yeah, castrati, like castration, like the castratos. I mean, there's a definite Bill Clinton vibe to Kosovo that's not there in North Macedonia. Yeah, for sure, worth checking out for a lot of reasons. I don't know. I'm trying to think about what else we could show that's really important. Just some. I mean, we have definitely pictures that we will share in the future because we recorded monologues walking around. Look at this, the Kingdom of Anarchy right here holding a scepter, and the bridge, the old bridge across Skopje with the neoclassical building there. I mean, you can see how much effort went into reclaiming this region. I would totally spend a lot more time in Skopje, maybe not in like the brutalist heat of the summer, but I could imagine spending a month here even. I could imagine spending a month in most of the places that we've been, though. I think honestly, we didn't talk much about Mostar. Maybe is there something that you think is worth bringing up that you liked particularly when you saw Mostar? But just really quickly to show you, the fountains are just surreal and incredible. And I mean, really, the effort that went into making Skopje look as beautiful as it did, and the amount of money that they must have spent to do this, and also the ingenuity, because they didn't just buy. They have like double-decker London-style tourist buses and micro Disney-style trains, but they're not actually those buses or those trains. They're some sort of Slavic jerry-rigged version of them that they've made themselves in order to accomplish the same goal, which is a very kind of a Slavic stereotype. Look at your meat tray right here that they produce. Like this is a, this is a sausages and steaks and things like that. The style of food that they present in Skopje, like big Macedonian meals.
Yeah, I will say though, if for some reason you're not too much of a carnivore like I am, then it is quite difficult to find vegetarian options at quite some of these places. Although since they have organic produce, the salads, they can be great. But yeah, expect a lot of meat and a lot of cevapi, cevapcici, or cevape, however it is pronounced exactly. I'm still not sure, all these variants. But yeah, lots of meat everywhere. But even that could actually be organic and sourced locally, which then, of course, is an incredible boost over the quality you would regularly get in a European supermarket, for example, or I guess most American supermarkets for that matter. So even being a carnivore, most likely somewhere here in the Balkans, is a lot more healthy than trying to do the same thing with some industrialized farming in the more westernized world.
We're gonna have to save the footage for a later point because the footage isn't loading well. But I can show you generally in Mostar, there's a density of buildings that didn't exist for a long time. Mostar is, speaking again of Star Wars, right? Like the look of Mostar is clearly inspirational for big parts of the Star Wars Episode 1. Like he looked at Naboo as some kind of Mostar or Sarajevo, but really Mostar. Mostar is just an incredibly beautiful city, and this is the rebuilt bridge. And we have interviews with some of the bartenders there, how that Mostar has changed over the years. But it's really fascinating that they have beer in people consider it a Muslim city, but it's not. I mean, it has a mosque every direction you could go, and there are tons of Muslims there.
And Actually, while sitting at that bar where they sell beer and play some, they actually played a French radio station which was playing rock music. Somehow it was a station without ads, which was cool, but like really French station with rock, I guess American rock or whatever else is popular. And then at the same time, while sitting there, the muezzin started shouting the call to prayer just right over the river, across the river in view of the bridge. So that was a pretty amazing, interesting fusion experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of religious animosity or religious division does, you can see that under the Muslim banner, Mostar had Christians of Catholic and Orthodox descent, but also Islam was maybe different at the time, looked at as almost Protestantism because of the schism between the East and the West. Islam stood as sort of a third option for a lot of the people. So it wasn't Islam the way we think of it today, and particularly Iranian. I mean, there are certainly Persian tourists and people that are changing the vibe of Islam and making it more Deuteronomic or even Talmudic, you could say. But there's definitely a lot of just like chicks in green dresses, chicks in green tops, dudes that are drinking a beer before they go to, take their wudu. Wudu is wudu is the washing that they do, special washing. The real stereotype is how clean the Muslims are because they, in this area before prayer, go and wash themselves, and they wash themselves therefore 5 times a day because they pray 5 times a day. So they're washing their hair, they're washing their face, they're washing their feet, both feet, and then their left and right hands. And I mean, this is the culture of being clean all day long. So that's, I think, an interesting stereotype. And the fact that they usually don't drink, that's not completely accurate, even though there are rules that you're supposed to abstain from drugs and alcohol. You'll see that this is a conversation that they're having with themselves. They're still drinking coffee. They're supposed to not be taking psychoactive substances that ruin their mind. So tobacco and coffee are still being used, and they're debating that with themselves. And drinking a beer or two or a glass of wine isn't out of the ordinary for a lot of these the Muslims of Bosnia. And yeah, just generally that under the Muslim banner, all of the religions were accepted. There was a jizya tax for people that weren't Muslim living in Muslim cities because the money went to and military janissaries, which is a major thing. The military janissary tax, I'm seeing the signs of it more and more. Like looking at Protestant Germans, Lutherans, even Orthodox in these regions, they don't recognize it as clearly as I do, but they're using Muslim talking points so deeply in their ideologies, which is nothing like to be upset about necessarily, but it's really ironic because they spend so much time talking about how they hate Muslims, these kinds of Orthodox Christians particularly, and yet their ideas of what the Bible is, like the recitation of God, Quran means recitation. Like so much of what their talking points are straight lifted from the period when their families were forced to be Muslim janissaries, or maybe even forced is the wrong word, because it was essentially being educated and making money, commissions that went to your family, bless you again, people were taken care of in a lot of ways during that period of time by this more open empire. And there's a reason why Sarajevo and even before the Kosovo War, Sarajevo was greatly bombed and destroyed because it's and Mostar as well, but particularly Sarajevo was a library holding thousands of years of duplicated and saved texts, where it was one of the places where there were no copies of some of these books. And while a lot of them were religious or poetic, a lot more of them were chronology, journals, histories, and philosophies that are forever disappeared. And so when we think of Bosnia, we think of these areas, I think a lot of the time, I don't know what people think of when they think of Bosnia, but I'm not sure if people think of it as a Vatican or a Vienna or something like that, like a Constantinople. But really, it was a place where so many important works of art and of philosophy and of law were not just stored but created and thought of and synthesized. It was a place of great thinking for thousands of years. Bosnia equals Hillary Clinton. That was something worth saying, is that underneath and near the statue of the Bill Clinton statue in Kosovo, there is a Hillary's lingerie store, which was pretty funny.
Absolutely. That was pretty hilarious. Well, I think that's a good first insight into where we've been. Again, we'll do our best, hopefully this year some point, to edit some of these things together. I think this could totally be a whole documentary. We'll see how far we get there. We'll see what parts we publish when or how. Also, what we've done, which is pretty amazing, we have the whole recording of the presentation about the Bosnian pyramids, which we didn't even talk about much today. We'll have to do extra shows on that. And also, for sure, we'll invite Martin Hipp on soon, because he's been traveling with us for that first week, going through all of these countries. And he has his own insights, of course. We're very much looking forward to be sharing that with all of you.
Really quickly, I will say, though, about the Bosnian pyramid. We were going through it, and we went through all the tunnels of the Bosnian pyramid, and we do have fantastic works to share because we did private interviews with our friend Eldar, someone who I'd met at the Visoko pyramid last time I was there.
Bass guy.
Super bass guy. We prayed with him at the Visoko mosque, this beautiful mosque we went into, and it was very interesting to talk to him about Joseph Smith and Muhammad. But one of the things we talked about was, who do you think loves to go to get their ions charged at the Bosnian pyramid inside of the tunnels? Who goes in and meditates there before every single tennis game? Novak Djokovic, one of the most important Serbian tennis players in the world, someone who refused the more recent experimental medical treatments, will say, if you know what I'm saying.
It makes you wonder, because from what I understand, Novak Djokovic is not exactly in his prime, as you would say, for a regular tennis player. Supposedly, what I heard, is already like 40 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
If that is correct. So that is very interesting that someone like that is even able to compete at that level. So there is something he must be doing right. And just since we're talking about ionization and all of that, one of the things which I was very happy to find here, anyone who's into water as much as I am, and of course in the US, many people use water filtration. In many cases, even in Europe, it can be smart to do that. But one thing they have here is this type of water, which I like to call it prolong my life water, because the amazing thing here is it literally says it on the bottle as an advertisement. You can see it here. It's 8.8 pH or more, which means it's highly alkaline. Anyone who's into that, they know what that means. So we are very happy that we can even buy bottled water here that tastes pretty good, and potentially helps to keep your system working properly, which is something you need with all the coffee and all these things around here. But of course, also here at the beach, you have the negative ionization as well. But most of it you can get, or the highest potential values ever measured, from what we understand, are actually at various sites close to the Bosnian pyramids, and especially within these Ravna tunnels. And really, literally everyone going there can immediately feel the difference. So whatever is going on there, something's going on there, and there must be a reason why many individuals that have various issues decide to go there. And even a top star athlete, however unorthodox he may seem or non-mainstream, he's going there, he must be onto something, or he would hardly be as successful as he is.
Or maybe he's just a superstitious Slav and don't take any medical advice.
Of course not,
Cool. Well, yeah, that was great. I appreciate that you guys were here, and thanks, Raf, for taking this trip with me so far. It's been pretty great. We have plenty of weeks left.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, for watching and listening. Enjoy yourselves, and catch y'all next time at NEUROPA.
Good viewer, watch Xirtus. Watch Xirtus.